Great lawyers don't always know how to build great law firms. Let's change that. Join Ben Gideon as he shares hard-won lessons from building his own financially successful law firm and practical insights from top law firm entrepreneurs, business consultants, and more. This is a podcast for lawyers, by lawyers. Welcome to Elawvate. Build and grow your law firm. Produced and powered by Law Pods.
Elawvate, Build and Grow Your Law Firm is sponsored by Supio. Supio is a cutting-edge AI program designed specifically for plaintiff trial lawyers. I have to say, I did their demo just the other day. It is a fantastic product. It does so many things well, but one of the things I was just blown away with is the way it creates medical bill summaries that have been the bane of the existence of paralegals and plaintiffs' firms for decades. It does it in seconds. It's able to identify every bill from every provider, organize it, and then identify records where there's a bill but no record, and it can keep that going throughout the life of the case. It can do a million other things, which we'll talk about as we go forward, but you should get on Supio. They just got their Series B funding. They've got 60 plus employees. It's a great business, and get on and do the demo and see what they can do for you if you're in a plaintiff's practice. We're also brought to you by Vision Spark. Vision Spark is the search firm that specializes in finding your law firm, someone like Jeff Wright. We used Vision Spark to find our COO, and I've got to tell you, it was an incredibly good process. So I can talk from the side of the business owner who's searching for a COO. What was the process like from your side, Jeff, as the person being recruited?
It was thorough. It was. I felt at times I was being interrogated, and it was a long process, but it was probably the most thorough process I've been through in my career. And their follow-up, even since I've been hired, we've had monthly calls, and they just want to follow up. And I think the way they put it was, we want to make sure we didn't sell you a bill of goods, Jeff. We want to make sure everything we told you was correct, that it was a good fit. What made it a good fit? What did we do right? What did we do wrong? And I think you couldn't ask for more in a search firm.
Yeah, and I think, we obviously made the right choice in hiring you, but they found just an amazing pool of really top-notch candidates, which, you were the best of, Jeff, which speaks to you. But they found people we never could have located on our own, people from different states, people with extraordinarily interesting backgrounds. The expense was actually worth its weight in gold. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking for an implementer or a COO, I think they can also do some other positions, but I would reach out and talk to the folks at Vision Spark. And finally, the podcast today is brought to you by 1% for Planet. Our firm, when we started, committed ourselves to joining 1% for Planet. 1% for Planet is an organization where members like ours commit to giving 1%, in our case, of all of our fee revenues to environmental nonprofit organizations. It's been a wonderful fit for us. We've probably contributed to 24 really great organizations that help preserve the environment, particularly in the northern New England states where we practice. It allows us opportunities to attend events like the one you just went to, Jeff.
Yeah, it's an organization down in southern Maine that is a refuge for injured wild animals, and they try and rehab them, and the ones that are unable to be rehabilitated to a point that they can go back to their natural environment, they house them there, and they use them as to teach classes and teach children. They've rescued somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 injured wild animals in the last 5 to 7 years. It's an extraordinary organization.
Yeah, and it's just so great to be able to support all these organizations. And when you are a member of 1% for Planet, one of the cool things is you're authorized to use the 1% logo, and we do. It's on our it's part of our branding as a firm. It's on all of our digital marketing. It tends to be on our it's on our letterhead. I mean, when we submit a brief to the court, it's got the 1% for Planet logo on it. And I just think it's a nice thing to have your business associated with something positive like that, to send a message to the world that you are giving back. And we would encourage all law firms that have the means and interest to contact 1% for Planet and become members. And if you do that, please reach out to us and we will give you a plug on the show as a new 1% for Planet member.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Elawvate, Build and Grow Your Law Firm. I'm Jeff Wright, Chief Operating Officer at Gideon, and as always, joined by our host, owner, and partner, Ben Gideon. Today, we are very pleased to be joined by Supio co-founder and CEO, Jerry Zhou. For those of you that don't know, Supio is an AI-powered document intelligence platform that is specifically tailored for personal injury and mass tort firms. Hopefully I got that right, Jerry. And
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Good. We're excited.
One thing we should point out is that Supio was kind enough to sponsor our podcast as well. So we really appreciate that. Well, I was just going to, as a segue, point out that we have a sister podcast, Elawvate, the Trial Lawyer podcast, and we just finished recording that episode with your head of partnership development, Ed Kirk, and one of the lawyers who is an early adopter of Supio and has a big law firm, I think in Texas, named Will Davis. And if folks want to know more about the Supio platform, its functionality, the specific case studies of what it can be used for, and efficiency gains and how it works, tune into that podcast and listen to that episode. It was really good and very informative. Sorry, Jeff, I'll turn it back to you.
No, that was good. I was just going to say, so Jerry, a large part of our audience is individuals that are either have their own firms and are looking to scale them and grow them, but a number of them are at current firms and are right on the edge of deciding whether they should go out on their own or not, and do they have the ability and the skill set to do that. I was wondering if you could maybe start with some of your backstory. If I understand it correctly, former Microsoft engineer, you were there along with your other co-founder, Kyle, and kind of what was the genesis of you deciding to leave Microsoft, which I assume was a very good job, and go out on your own and take the leap of faith?
Yeah. Well, I've known Kyle since we were in elementary school. Grew up in the same neighborhood in Seattle. Both shared the same elementary, middle, high school. College, we went away, came back, and we always wanted to build a company together. And, we started building our own apps on iOS, went to a company called Avalara, which was the largest startup in Seattle at the time, which eventually IPO'd. And then from there, we went to Office 365. And we stayed there until COVID started. And when that happened, we thought this was the opportunity to build our company. It's now or never. I'm in my mid-30s, and
time's running out.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like you got to take the risk, right? So that's when we took the leap, and we thought, let's go and try. And in my entire career, and I feel like I can resonate with attorneys in this way, especially ones that want to build their own firms, right? It's like you've just accumulated all these skills and you're ready to take that leap yourself. So when that happened, we were like, let's go and build our own company. So we sat in a Starbucks and we wrote down all the ideas that we had about things that we thought we could contribute to the world, all the things we learned from our companies. And legal was front and center because we came from Office 365. We had a lot of expertise in document productivity automation. We worked in the ecosystem of the platforms and the integrations and how you try to automate this type of work. So that's how we founded Supio.
And that was 2021, correct?
Yep.
And just in terms of the decision to go into the legal space, and then it's sort of more focused even than that now, right? It's plaintiff trial lawyers or plaintiffs lawyers more specifically. I mean, Supio is designed for us. How did you end up in that universe?
When we started, we must have spoken to hundreds of attorneys, and when we thought about it, there were a couple considerations. One was, if you speak to the majority of lawyers, right, a lot of them are on the billable hour, and so when we start talking about building software, it seems like it's something that is contradictory to like their entire business model. And then if you listen to the language of like what they're saying, which is really like, they want to be compliant, there's too much risk. It's like, and the key pain points they have would be like they don't like building a budget for their clients, right? There's not enough there for us to address or transform that work. And they're not really ready to adopt technology the same way that trial lawyers are. And then one day we were giving a talk in Florida, and we were talking about, the next generation. This is run like foundation models just started, and we were talking about how you can take these really small models back in the day, and you can automate large parts of documents. A bunch of trial lawyers were so excited, and at that point, we were like, we found our home. And we learned about the business model and how I think trial lawyers are probably some of the most entrepreneurial of the bunch, right? And it's how we felt like we were able to find the market that we belonged in.
Yeah, it's an interesting insight in that if you have a case where you don't get paid until the end, your incentive is to manage the case as efficiently as possible. So technological efficiencies actually help your bottom line. Whereas if you're billing by the hour and you're saving hours, that's less billable hours. And maybe that doesn't actually help your bottom line. So we really appreciate those efficiency gains that technology offers to us. Can you talk about one of the things we're doing in this podcast is taking our listeners through the journey of starting a new business, in this case, our law firm, and going through the wilderness of the early startup phase and then the growth, into more of a managed business and into the growth phase. Can you tell us a little bit about your startup phase? How did you guys navigate that, and what lessons do you have for people that are in getting into a startup business of any sort in navigating that very fraught chapter of a new business?
I think there's lots of similarities to any entrepreneur, right? Like a founder's journey is one of personal growth. So, when I think about a law firm with a trial lawyer that starts a firm, or me starting this, like my skill set, I'm a software engineer, and the way I have the skills I have to connect with my customers is through building software. So initially, when we interacted with our design partners, early customers, the value we can create for them is trying to build software that works. And we would just throw and iterate every week, right? We'd be working, 80, 120 hours a week. We'd build a new prototype. Folks like Will and those in the other podcasts, we'd put something in front of them and we'd see what resonates. And, we try to not have, like, we had an end goal of where we knew that people needed, which is to really help them understand their data, but we weren't forming really strong opinions early on. And by doing that, we were able to validate parts of the market, understand like the pain points and the actual work of what a trial lawyer does. And by having that understanding, you can end up building software really quickly. So I would say like it takes years to understand something as nuanced as this particular industry. And even now, we're constantly still learning. I feel like we're still in a startup mode. I think for like a lawyer trying to build a law firm, it's kind of the same. Where in the beginning, you don't really have very much but yourself. And you have to figure out how to market and sell that. And then as you scale, you end up learning different types of skills, and you try to scale through other people.
You're probably familiar with the concept of the lean startup model and the Eric Ries books, and had you sort of followed that model in terms of what do they call it, the smallest or the
MVP?
Yeah. I forget what that stands for. The minimum something viable product, and then continuing to iterate rather than trying to guess what people want.
Yep, 100%. I mean, if you think about the only resource, like, when we started the company, we were in this 800 square foot office, like in kind of the shadiest part of Seattle, and it was just a few of us, and there's very limited resources. You can only take a few bets at a time, and you need to learn a lot from every single one of these bets, right? So you really have to be selective of what you're spending time in. For us, obviously, it's building software, so you can't build everything. So what is the thing that resonates the most? And so by making those bets carefully and being able to partner well with our customers, then we can quickly get to an MVP that's useful. And then from there, you can kind of expand and build this beautiful product that's all encompassing. And even now, we're still evolving, but you have to have an MVP, or else the kind of the risks you take on early on are too great for us to be able to have misses and recover from those.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's a great point. And one of the concerns that startups have is there is a way to grow yourself into bankruptcy if you're not doing it in a very deliberate, measured way. What lessons did you learn, or was there a time where you thought you were heading in one direction and maybe you put the brakes on and said, we need to sit back, think about this, and revisit it?
There's quite a few, right? I would say one of the early lessons we have or had was to partner with the thought leaders and the top tier kind of firms in the United States. And the reason for that is because they're masters of their craft and they want to partner with you to do better. And for us, as an engineer, I think the most of the time, what's easy is to look at the work that someone does and say, let me go automate that. And that's not really exciting for people. If you think about lawyers and practitioners, before generative AI, the work that folks do is pretty much the same over the last 30 years. Like the biggest innovation probably experienced by this industry is you don't need to read a book. You can search it online through Westlaw. And that's super exciting, but not really exciting at all, right? And it's that's the biggest change in terms of how you can find information. And now suddenly there's AI that you can talk to that talks back to you, that can automate concepts. So it's not about taking your work and saying, hey, I can just automate this document. It's really about transforming the work into a new way. And that is going to be a partnership where you go back and forth with your customers and you challenge them and show them insights after you deeply understand what the lawyer does.
In terms of that approach to things, of the minimal viable product and then continuing to refine it and iterate it with input from your customers, knowing what you know now about lawyers, do you think is that a transferable concept that applies in any way to a law firm setting, or do you think it really is unique to tech startups?
I think it's definitely transferable. There's parts that are really transferable depending on what the law firm wants to do, right? So if it's a law firm that's high volume and or they want to be high volume, then it becomes really transferable in terms of trying to figure out what the minimum product that you're trying to scale is. And scaling the product is hard, right? It's not like you can start with building a custom product for every law firm, and then by the time you're in your hundreds or thousands of law firms, you cannot do that to everyone, right? So you have to find what works, and then you essentially hire and inject capital and do all these things so you can scale that. It's the common elements that are successful. And for a law firm, especially on the high volume side, then you start thinking about like what is the single case that you can deliver to every single prospective client that comes in, and how do you package that and scale that? I think on the other side, what's interesting is also these like larger cases and trial lawyers that are constantly going to trial and trying to win the millions, multi-million dollar cases. And in this side of things, it's more about like, what are the bets that you're going to take, right? It's like you can't really take too many of these cases on a year. And if you miss a couple, then quickly you don't have the cash flow to be able to sustain this as well. So there's a lot of similarities in terms of the entrepreneurship that you can have between a startup and a law firm.
Can you take us through in your early days? I take it your partner is also a software engineer.
Yep.
So
That's right.
mean, you guys both had similar and overlapping skill sets, but probably there were things that neither of you were good at. Although at the beginning, you both had to do everything. If that's how it worked for us anyway. We were the
Yep.
marketing people.
100%.
We were the intake people. We were the finance and accounting people. You do it all when you start, right? When you started to gain some traction and were able to start hiring people, what were the most important first hires you made and why? And can you kind of take us through the early growth and how you prioritized that?
I would say like there's a couple thoughts there, right? Like I think most founders are of limited skill set. It's really rare that you have everything. So there's one thing is to not get trapped into building a bunch of stuff and developing a bunch of skills that potentially have diminishing returns. So I'm not a marketer, and if I spent a lot of my time doing marketing, then Supio probably would not be where it is today because I'm just not a very good marketer. So being able to find a good marketer to come in is going to be incredibly helpful, or finding someone that's really good at building partnerships and understanding how lawyers work. Someone like Ed, he was one of the early employees in the company, and just watching him work and learn allows us to understand, the gaps as a founder and how these other critical hires have a role inside our company. And then as we grow, we can hire really good talent across all these different other functions that then help us scale much faster.
When you and your partner started, did you start with some kind of a vision plan or a business plan? And how did you go about crafting that? And what do you think is important about a business or vision statement, and what needs to be in there from your perspective?
Back of the napkin at Starbucks.
Back of the napkin at Starbucks. Less so about vision. Like on a basics side, right? There were a couple things that we thought about. One was like after speaking with a bunch of lawyers, we just we used our own internal kind of values, which is really we wanted to enable people to do the work that they value in society, and we wanted to create a delightful product for people. I think as software engineers, one of our primary thoughts
That's an
is
interesting word, delightful. You don't really
yeah.
think of software necessarily in that fashion. It sounds more like an ice cream, but
It's true, but like I would point out, like even if you look at the product we're using to do this podcast right now, Riverside, right? It's quite a delightful product. I joined this a second ago, and I immediately noticed that you guys can actually access my microphone drivers, so you instantly know whether I have audio or not. Right, these are really thoughtful touches in a professional piece of software that then makes you want to use this, right? And it ultimately becomes probably the de facto software for recording podcasts. And that is a very delightful experience that's very thoughtfully built for this function. And building these tools are incredibly satisfying for software engineers like ours.
it's really an important insight there, because I can tell you we signed up with a competitor of Supio early on, which I mentioned in the other podcast, the Thomson Reuters product, which is awful, by the way. We tried to extricate ourselves from the contract, and then they very meanly told us we couldn't, even though the product is not worth anything. But it is the opposite of delightful. Nothing works the way it should. Nothing's intuitive. you have to upload all the documents. It takes forever. And then once they're uploaded, you have to do it again if you want to do something else with them. Nothing seems to be designed for the benefit of the user whatsoever. And it's just, I guess I hadn't thought of the word delightful, but when you see something that is designed in a way that is a constant source of annoyance and frustration or counterintuitive, you appreciate how delightful products that aren't like that are, even though you might not notice that at the time, such as how an iPhone works or so forth.
Yep.
It's a pretty, I think, a really important insight.
And I think to stay on that topic a little, you being a software engineer, AI is probably, I don't want to say old hat to you, but a lot of people listening to this have just started to dip their toe into it, whether it's using ChatGPT or using Perplexity or utilizing a third-party software such as yours. One thing that I noticed with Supio is AI is still a very unknown commodity. And I think the general public has some trepidation about how valid it can be in its answers, and also what's the future look like, because it's changing so quickly. One thing that I noticed when looking at Supio is you have, and I think it's two different verbiages for it, the human expert review and the human in the loop. And which is basically a double check of AI, if I'm understanding it correctly. But I thought maybe you could talk about that a little, because I think that is a differentiator between you and a lot of your competitors.
Yeah, I would actually bucket that into the delightful category, right? we initially realized that there were large performance gaps with how models work and like the products that we're actually delivering. So, we wouldn't be able to keep our promises to our customers if we were just shipping some type of lightly wrapped model to like a customer, and then you can't really trust the actual product itself. So in order to actually be able to deliver something helpful for our customers, we have to utilize expert review. And by doing that, you have confidence in the data set, right? Like one of the early insights we had from both the generative AI aspect and also for law firms is like law firms work with a finite set of data. Like for a personal injury lawyer, you guys deal with very similar types of data case across case. So we needed to build a muscle and familiarity with this type of data. So using experts in the loop teaches us that. It helps us understand, what are the differences between the different types of medical bills, to the medical records, to the depositions, to the complaints, what's an answer? Like how does the data inside a case flow? And it really is that tells a story across everything. So by being able to use experts here, we can continue to expand our footprint of all the different types of data, and it helps us learn and improve our processes, our models, and the product itself.
Yeah. And when you say experts, for example, if we're uploading radiology records, at some point you actually had an expert radiologist looking at the results, correct? And making sure that your software is regurgitating the correct information back to us, correct?
For the data sets, yes. What we would do is we would try to figure out what the heck this record is, right? It's like, what are we looking at? And then when these types of records come out over and over and over again, then we quickly try to figure out, like, is the AI summarizing? Is it extracting the right things? And then once we get those data points, because it's impossible to have radiologists look at every single radiology record, right? But we can standardize that. And then once we standardize that, then you just have someone checking the work that the AI does. And one of our early thoughts there was like, if you can define like what is the information you even want to extract from a radiology record, and at some point, if you can define that, we call that an interface in software, right? Like if you can define the interface, there's no difference between AI and people doing the work. It ends up being interchangeable. And as AI improves, then it's obviously just going to be able to get more and more accurate. And then you just need to really have this like validation framework people AI software that then helps you measure that gap that slowly gets closed over time.
Interesting.
Need help on a complex personal injury or medical malpractice case? Gideon Asen accepts case referrals and regularly co-counsels with lawyers nationwide on high-value claims. The firm has recovered millions of dollars in cases that competitors turned away because they dig deeper. Ready to learn more? Email bgideon@gideonasenlaw.com to start the conversation. Gideon Asen shares fees as permitted by the laws of each state. Don't let complex cases overwhelm your practice. Elevate justice together with Gideon Asen.
So I know that over that relatively short period of time since your founding, Supio has grown exponentially. I think you have 150 or more employees currently. And you mentioned, early on that as you had needs that were in areas outside your area of core competencies or expertise, you would bring people in, such as Ed, to help with relationship development and so forth. And we found as we're growing the law firm, and I think law firm owners probably share this, there's great benefit as you bring people on that have that expertise and can fill those seats in your org chart. However, that brings with it other challenges such as managing people. For example, Jeff Wright, our chief operating officer, is here because at some point in our growth cycle, the firm grew beyond a point where it made sense for us to manage, or we could competently manage it without, sort of professionalized help. Can you just talk a little bit about that? At what point, and how did you approach management of the business with an eye towards scaling and growth?
There's a couple immediate trade-offs that kind of are maybe an indirect answer here. I think when you look at the people strategy for any company, as I've learned, especially Supio grows so quickly, right? It's like you at some point we have to make the decision of what do we hire outside expertise on and what do we decide to grow ourselves. So when I look at, for example, our AI engineering strategy, product strategies out there, right? These are places where Kyle and I spike in skill set. So we don't really need, or it's going to be very hard to find expertise that's going to be taking over that aspect versus what we've been doing ourselves. Very similar to, I think, if you're a trial lawyer and you build a law firm, it's unlikely that you'll find a trial lawyer better than you to do those trials for a long time, right? That's something you keep yourself. But then managing a large-scale business, being able to kind of get the rhythms and routines of this company growing, that's something that someone else can potentially do a lot better. They have a lot more experience doing this across many firms, right? So we'd want to acquire that level of talent across our functions.
And how have you seen your time allocation change? And you must have an enormous number of, balls in the air that you're juggling as CEO, and also doing some level of the engineering side of it.
Yeah, it's well, I always tell folks I run a different company every 6 months. I have to learn a new one, right? And which is absolutely crazy. There's a couple things, right? You go from spending a lot of time building to a lot of time building through people, and then I spend a lot more time today figuring out the right environment and constraints that allow these people to succeed, right? It's like if you have no direction, then someone does ends up not really trying to fulfill your strategy. So if you can frame what really good looks like, and then depending on how experienced these people are, good can be a quarter from now versus good just a week from now, right? And we spend a lot more time figuring out where the gaps in the company are, and then trying to figure out how what a new hire in this position could really change that particular function. That's probably where I spend a lot of my time. I also spend it recruiting. So, we want the best talent. I think what I've noticed speaking to law firms, right, is really good lawyers can change the business outcome of the firm. So it's very similar to us finding, great talent as well.
Let me just ask one follow-up, and then I'll turn it over to you, Jeff. We're in the process actually of recruiting for another lawyer right now. What recommendations do you have from your experience finding high quality personnel on the recruiting side? Are you using LinkedIn? Do you guys use professional recruiting firms or some combination? What are you guys doing for that?
Both. So, I mean, we build our own like talent team, right? That is like with a couple in-house recruiters. We use external recruiters as well. Through our network. I like on the recruiting side. I think like the biggest insight that I was taught from an early stage was, we have to have aligned incentives, and as a corporation, we have more tricks up our sleeve, so to speak, because corporations have naturally shareholders, right? And everyone in Supio is a shareholder. So that just means that if you want to find great talent, then they're giving you a piece of their life. So in exchange, we'll give them a piece of our company. And that kind of creates a really nice aligned incentive. Obviously, it creates risks and all the things around that. But ultimately, I think to make a meaningful change in a short amount of time in an industry, you need people that can go all in.
Yeah, what I was going to ask is, as every business starts to grow and they have to make hiring decisions, I think you have a lot of conversations and have to develop a philosophy of, do you outsource it or do you bring it in house? And some people struggle with, do we hire a fractional CFO or do we actually hire one in house? Same with marketing, PR, and down the line. Did you guys try and develop a philosophy early where you would rather have somebody in-house 100% dedicated to you, or did you go the fractional route at the beginning?
I think in the beginning you have to go fractional for a lot of things because you can't afford to bring everyone in house, right? And you want that expertise. As you grow, then we have scale. So at scale, then we probably need someone full time, and then there's the benefit of this person being full time and gaining experience in what we do, right, in our industry. And that naturally creates leverage for the company to gain value. Like if I think about talent in general, like a person who comes into a company or a firm and works over the course of 3 or 4 years, if the firm is static and achieves really nothing else, that person's experience over those 4 or 5 years or 3 or 4 years becomes the added value of that particular company, right? It's the minimum you can do to help like a firm or a company grow in value.
What's the you mentioned that people that personnel who they become shareholders, so in that sense they've got a stake in the business. You mentioned that you're looking for people that are all in. It's interesting phraseology because we developed a set of core values for our firm. The phrase we used to summarize all of our core values was all in. And we like it. But have you guys done kind of core value work, or is there a way you've distinguished what the qualities are of people from a character and personality standpoint that are the good fit for your business?
100%. To be honest, I was probably late to the game. This was after we raised our Series B, and I looked around and we had over 100 people, so many new faces. And part of what I've tried to do as a founder is I try to interview every single person in the company, at least 15, 20 minutes, right? And that's
How
created
often do you do that?
every week,
Wow.
probably like 4 or 5 people,
Oh my
right? So
God.
but I end up being a blocker sometimes because my schedule doesn't allow for this, and like we need to grow. So as we grow, we need to define our identity. So for us, there's been kind of 4 core values. Number one being customer transformation. So we think of this as a play on customer obsession, which is the more obvious one. If you're a company selling to a deep profession and we're not customer obsessed, then it removes the North Star. We're not tethered to reality. To me, adding to that would be customer transformation because, we happen to sell AI to the industry. And that means that we're helping our customers transform their practices into kind of an AI native practice. And that means we have to challenge them. We're more partners than just doing whatever the customer wants. And I think law firms find this with clients all the time as well, right? To get them to take a settlement, to really work with them on prepping for trial, right? There's a lot here that's much more than let's just create great customer service.
Yeah, and I mean, probably every industry thinks of itself this way, but being a trial lawyer, being tied into that community, I think it is a very insular community that has a strong culture of its own and wants to be treated as if it's unique and different, um, even from other lawyers. And I know one thing I've liked about Supio is that it's a product that uh, seems designed for us and has had a whole bunch of early adopters, including a lot of the injury board members who are really top practitioners in the field and thought leaders, as you say, who've given input to it from an early phase. So um, it just that seems like a really great distinguishing factor for Supio. I guess on the flip side, I wonder about, is there a ceiling to that, because trial lawyers are only a small fraction of the overall lawyers in America, and probably there aren't trial lawyers outside of America that really do this kind of legal practice. So you've limited yourself in terms of the company's ceiling to a fraction of the legal market. Is that an issue that worries you, or do you think that the market there is large enough and the opportunities for additional spin-off products and other things are going to allow for uh, continued growth?
I think of our company the same way earlier as I touched on with employees, right? It's like we have to create constraints. And the constraint of focusing on trial lawyers, plaintiff lawyers, allows us to be really creative in solving for the pain points in this space. And ultimately, like I think for a company to do well and persist, we need to make sure that we're creating as much value as possible for our customers. And if we do that well and everything goes well, then we'll be a great company in this industry. And at that point, we can pause and take a look at what's next. But even right now, before the dust settles, there's so much to do here that we're not even looking at what's beyond.
Since you're in the AI world yourself, what elements of AI do you use that aren't your own product to help you run your own business?
This is an interesting one. So, like we use a lot of AI products, and part of that we force ourselves to, because we want to understand what's out there and what are the, like, everything from like a really basic, nice design element from ChatGPT, where it's like just a really easy product to use, to like agentic coding systems that help software engineers write code. Right. Actually, a lot of the inspiration we draw from for Supio comes from software engineering tools. So if you look at the way that like a programmer would use like these new products like Cursor or like Cloud Code, or they help them write like entire pages and pages of code. And they take all the data inside a code base, and then they're able to generate new code for you as a co-pilot. It's kind of like a partner. And of all the industries out there, I would say this is by far the most effective so far. And it's easy for a software engineer to build tools for themselves because they are the customer. And so we look at that and we look at the patterns around that, and we're like, hey, there's lots of similarities to lawyers. Like, lawyers need to understand all their case data. They're trying to write all these documents. Can you really build AI that understands the case data so you can actually generate the words that they need to be able to go and create, right? And so there's lots of patterns that we borrow from across other industries.
One thing we've struggled with is we do a lot of medical malpractice cases, and so I find that a general AI like a Chat GPT, but I know others use Perplexity or some other platforms, but they're enormously powerful for us because we can ask very broad-based questions in areas we don't know a lot about initially, and then refine the inquiry down to really get high-level data that we need to understand our cases. On the flip side, you have the specific AIs that have all your case data in it. So it has your depositions and your medical records. Where we've struggled is, how do you mesh those two so that you have an AI that has broad-based knowledge beyond just your case. For instance, somebody goes to the emergency department and they have a presenting set of signs and symptoms and get some lab studies and some imaging studies, and then the doctors make a certain recommendation, and you want to know, is that consistent with guidelines and standards, and is that standard of care, or did they miss something? That's not going to be in your case data yet, because you may not even have a case or even understand what those issues are. So you don't have enough data in your own case to answer it. But then as you start to put your case data in, you want to mesh that up with the broader human knowledge. Where are we heading with that kind of inquiry of the general and the specific?
I'm so excited about this one because, my weekend spend sometimes is around prototyping agentic systems. One of the ones that I've done recently is, we were looking at a query in our system that wasn't responding very well, and it had to do with a medical malpractice case where they were doing a laparoscopic surgery and they did not have critical view of safety.
Gallbladder.
And yeah, exactly. And then, so it was interesting because, that the AI itself, on initial query, it couldn't pick this up. It would just be like, oh, yeah, there's a medical malpractice case here, but it wasn't able to give that specific answer, right? And one of the things we quickly realized about this was, the AI is kind of like a processor. It's naive. And we were doing so many motor vehicle accident cases where we treated these records as the source of truth. And then suddenly in malpractice, you actually treat these records with, I would think, more skepticism, right? And when you shift that context for the AI, that the responses become completely different. And these are the nuances that we focus a lot on. And as these cases evolve, even like something like being able to pick up a violation of standard of care, we think you can upload, 1,000 pages of medical records. Our agents will go in and we will look at the data and we'll say like, hey, as a personal injury lawyer, like in this data, where will we start? Like, what is this case about? What's the theory about this case? And then as it kind of goes through, it'll continue to iterate. And as we build more tooling, we do pull out outside data as we need it, right? Like if we need to incorporate legal research, that's our partnership with like certain vendors around legal research. If we need to go get medical records, we're currently looking at partnerships with those folks, right? As we need to pull out outside data, it's like really to achieve the thing that our customers want, which is really to perform analysis on this data is kind of, I think, where we're getting to.
Yeah, that'll be incredibly powerful when we get to that point.
I think we're close.
You do?
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And what about the one thing we're struggling with is, every law firm in America that does plaintiff's work has a backlog of probably thousands of deposition transcripts, tens of thousands of pages of that, medical records, other documents that are sitting in some files somewhere, none of which, for the most part, is publicly available. So none of the AIs are trained on that. Sometimes it's confidential, sometimes it isn't. Is there going to be a platform at some point where all of that information, or at least a subset of it, say one's own firm at least, can teach an AI, and then the AI will start to learn from the best lawyers out there, or from your own personal style or preference, how to take a deposition, how to review the records, how to analyze, do analytical thinking in a case without having to reinvent the wheel in every new case?
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction to separate out like what AI is taught versus how AI understands information, right? So for us, like we would approach the deposition problem we have with a more fundamental problem we're trying to solve, which is it's not really about like teaching the AI to help you like analyze your next case. It's actually teaching the AI to understand like the existing deposition that you pass in. So, if you have 1,000 depositions, and you have a question about your new case, we need to teach the AI how to go through depositions in general. the same way that an attorney does, right? Like, but you can do it at scale. You can parallelize like 15 agents. They can go through all your depositions, look for the patterns that you want, and then bring it back to you. And really, ultimately, like, I don't think that law firms want to share that data with other law firms for most part, right? So these are just tools that replicate human functions on a very basic scale that can then scale to, many new types of cases, new types of data that then we can utilize all the data inside the firm to help you with your one individual case.
But currently, if I'm on Supio and I'm uploading case data, is that refining the learning of the AI for my future cases or other lawyers' cases? Or is it you're creating those refinements more on a system level, separate and apart from the data that's being uploaded individually?
It's more about the scale of data we deal with, right? So right now, for in our opinion, like, the most effective part about AI, where we can create reliable results, is around a smaller data set, like one within a case. And sometimes cases aren't that small; they're actually quite large, right? And as we continue to develop this, you'll be able to access the data from other cases, specifically something like depositions from previous cases, or expert witnesses, or things like that, and pull them into this case. But it's really about how much data you're dealing with. So today, cases range from anywhere from pre-litigation from 10,000 or 1,000 pages to hundreds of thousands of pages. If you take the corpus of your entire firm, it becomes a lot larger and less reliable. So this is kind of a directional aspect that we're trying to go to, one step at a time, is how we were thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating stuff. So just to round it out here, I know you guys recently got Series B funding, and can you just tell us how does that work, and what does that allow for Supio now in terms of your future growth and vision?
We've raised our partners and us, we're super excited about this market, right? I think going back to where I was starting to talk about, it's like the way that lawyers, our customers, have worked hasn't really changed over the past few decades, right? And this funding is really a sign that, like, a lot of us believe that this type of technology will transform that. And so, this funding is going to help us parallelize a lot of our efforts and go a lot deeper, right? Some of the things we've been touched on today, they're being built as we speak. And we can hire really good engineers and work with great customers to go deliver this. In general, I think, as a startup, like, we're growing really quickly. We want to continue to grow quickly, and we need the best talent to come in and help us achieve this goal. And that's kind of where all of this is going toward.
Well, it's really fascinating stuff. I mean, it's a great case study in a successful startup that's moved into a large scale business. It's also one that affects our industry specifically that we're involved in. We very much appreciate, and we wish you all, and we appreciate your sponsoring our podcast. I hope our listeners will go and check out our other episode where we get into more of the specific capabilities of Supio, which is I have witnessed, and it's very impressive platform. And also get online and check them out. You can run a demo, I think, right online. Ed Kirk gave his personal email in our other show, so you can email him directly if you have questions or want to sign up. But Jerry, really appreciate your coming on and chatting with us today, and good luck moving forward. Hope we'll see you again.
It's been fun. Thank you for the opportunity. And, I view that we're just getting started. So stay tuned for all the exciting things that are to come.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Elawvate. Build and grow your law firm. Share with colleagues if you found it valuable. Remember, building a successful law firm takes discipline, strategy, and determination. But you're not alone. Produced and powered by LawPods.